I'd like to introduce our next project team. It's the Leadership Institute Social Equity Workshop Team. Stephanie Fernandez, Liz Parra, Katie Pease, Pamela Swan, Elizabeth Whitlow, and Tanya Nera.
Hello, I'm Stephanie, Tanya, Katie, Elizabeth, Liz, and Pamela. And we're going to start us off. So we did our project on a call for social equity workshop that we hopefully all attended in February. And I'm just going to open up with a little introduction. Our inspiring keynote speaker for our call to advance social equity workshop was Dr. Anthony Hyden from the California Endowment. He shared with us how place and zip code matter. Growing up in Montreal, Canada, in a beautiful environment, to leaving to Baltimore in 1985 for Johns Hopkins Medical School. As Dr. Hyden was being toured around by an upperclassman in the streets of Baltimore, he turns at him and asks, "When was there a war here?" The upperclassman turns around and says, "What do you expect? It's the inner city." We stand here 30 years later, and we can still be asked, what do you expect? I would like to quote Dr. Hyden on a very powerful call to action. You have to push your neck, you have to push forward, and you have to share what's on your mind.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I'd like to give just a little bit of background as to, well, for one thing, why am I up here with this wonderful group of class members, and why did the Leadership Institute want to hold this workshop that we're sharing with you this morning. And it really all started about maybe 9 months ago when someone approached our board of directors and said, we'd like the Leadership Institute to endorse our living wage campaign for the county. And of course, that is something that we are very supportive of. But our board had a great conversation about the fact that the living wage is just one piece of the puzzle, and that we felt the contribution we could make as an organization was to really look more broadly and to explore the systemic issues around inequities in our community rather than focusing in on one issue. And so after many conversations with some key stakeholders in the community, like the Community Foundation, Community Action Partnership, various folks in the county, we realized that the biggest contribution we could make, at least to start this work together, would be to bring our fellows together with other community leaders and engage in a dialogue about social inequity and what are the key issues that are really driving the growing gap between the haves and the have-nots. And so that was the impetus for this social equity workshop. We also realized that being a very small organization, we could not possibly do this on our own. And so one of our board members, Peter Ruppel, those of you who were in the class, probably remember Peter coming to one of the early class sessions and putting it out there and saying, who would like to make this your project and be part of putting this workshop together? And I'm very happy to share that this wonderful group of leaders came together and said, yeah, we want to help make this happen. They had no idea what they were getting themselves into. And this was one of those projects that kind of took a large number of twists and turns before we settled in on the agenda and how we were going to market it and who we wanted to get in the room. And I have to say that it was a huge success because we had the great folks here helping make it happen. We had over 150 people in February. Many of you were at that workshop and are really pleased with how that went. So, at the workshop, really what we were exploring is the issue of equity and how addressing the inequities in our community really is what will change the world. And I think in a number of the projects that we've already heard this morning, you can see that theme of equity and the desire to really address that. And this was actually one of the drawings that a participant made on the tables during the workshop. So the rest of the presentation, we'd like to talk about the connection between this workshop and the mission of the Institute, which is to inspire, educate, and connect leaders to create a model of sustainable community. And so we can see threads of this mission playing out throughout the workshop, and I'll turn it over to Katie to share the first around inspiration.
You can skip the next slide. So why addressing equity is a bit of a question, and we learned from the workshop that equity in our community is really right next door to a lot of where we live, has really become a life and death issue. It's really about the ability of everyone to be able to meet their basic human needs. I need food, I go to the store. I need shelter, I go home. When my kids are sick, I can take them to the doctor. But that's really not the case for a lot of people who live even close by to us. And so that brings me to the point of place matters. Unfortunately for some, where you live really determines your quality of life and your ability to meet those basic needs that I just spoke of. These are deeply rooted structural issues, both institutional and economic. And it will take a change of intention and considerable effort to make the changes that are needed. And so my third point today really, and this is a theme, of course, of our whole sort of 9 months together, of our workshop together, is that leadership really matters, and that we really all have the ability to make a difference. Inequity is sometimes reinforced by something as seemingly simple as the stories that we tell. For instance, do we talk about those less privileged with pity and judgment, or do we tell stories of their capabilities and potential? So in order to affect the transformation of our institutions, we will need to align our intentions, change the stories we tell, and work together to affect the major structural changes needed. So it's up to us, and our leadership matters.
I'm Elizabeth, and I want to talk about this thread of educate, and to educate. We know that many of us are engaged in this issue of social inequity because it's an ethical and moral issue. Some, though, need to be convinced because they're more interested in the economic implications. So we don't need to simply ask why the system invests in prisons. We need to demonstrate the cost and benefits by using concrete examples, like the difference of the cost of keeping youth in jail versus educating them in a way that allows them to contribute to their communities. As Dr. Eiten pointed out during our session at the conference, we're making choices about expenditures versus investments. Over the past 2 decades, California's spending per prisoner has increased nearly 3 times faster than the spending per K through 12 student. And you see the cost of prison is $62,000 per year, as opposed to the cost of an education of $9,100. You could advance this for me. The portrait of Sonoma affirms what we already know, that engaging parents in the child's life makes the biggest difference regarding disparities in communities. The Nurse-Family Partnership program that we learned about that day from our panelists is something that shows how to build those parent-child connections, and just showing that this evidence-based 30-year program that targets low-income and at-risk families has tremendous savings to society in social welfare, social justice, child welfare, life expectancy, and certainly in quality of life. Our Santa Rosa schools reflect the portrait of Sonoma, as Socorro Shields pointed out to us. The East Side has the most wealthy schools, as they are the most wealthy communities. And in the West Side, schools literally are called out as disparity areas. We can't just fix schools. Schools are a reflection of the community. Thus, the community as a whole must be transformed. The community schools approach provides the resources and supports that the students and their families need so that the students can show up at school and be as prepared as possible to learn and be ready for their school day. We have to have the courage to do place-based, to eradicate place-based inequities. Equal funding won't necessarily work. Some schools in some areas simply have larger needs. And finally, just that complex issues require complex responses. And so the integrated work with families in all places can get us to deeper solutions to these, or bigger solutions to these larger problems. And move to the next slide, which is Liz.
Connecting our leaders and connecting our community is vital to advance social equity. So how do we do this? We need to be inclusive, and we need to include everyone at the table. That means that the people that are most affected by these disparities are the ones that get to set the priorities about what they need in their communities. Now, we also need to do something that's a bit difficult. We need to have some courageous conversations to discussing disparities around gender inequality, social economic status, racial inequality. Those are difficult conversations to have, but if we're honest, if we're respectful, and if we listen to one another, we can be quite successful at it. We also have to learn how to work across sectors and outside of our silos. We've seen examples today of how we can be really successful at that, and we can accomplish great things together. And finally, we need to build trust and relationships in our community. That takes some time. So actually, people may not be used to working together, but we can be quite successful. Actually, I almost forgot one more thing. We need to invest, and we need to involve our youth. They are inspirational, they have so much energy to contribute, and just from our class this year, I have learned so much from the youth that are in our group. I mean, they really give us so much hope and think about what we can actually do together.
So, one of the central points of our conference was a call to action. And one of the central questions was, how do we get from inspiration to action? And so through the collective wisdom of the folks participating in the conference and our speakers, we came up with some real gems that we've cultivated and gleaned from this conference. And I think you'll get a sense they really resonate with a lot of what we've heard about already this morning. One of the first pieces was, you need to act, you need to move. Like this little gal here, she's getting ready. She's not going to study the board all day. She's going to lose a few pounds, but she's going to move forward. We also learned to fail early and fail fast. We heard that from Dr. Ike. And as the great author and philosopher C.S. Lewis said, failures are fingerposts on the road to achievement. One fails forward towards success. We also learned from the collective wisdom in the room that we really need to go for the low-hanging fruit. Let's begin with working on issues where we know we can get some wins. We can build those relationships, learn lessons, and move forward. Also, to be accountable, we heard a lot about metrics, didn't we? But we also heard metrics is not enough. So we can use those metrics so we have a common language that crosses sectors and silos. Yet at the same time, we change the narrative and use stories that move us emotionally. I don't know if any of you heard this morning on NPR, there was a study done in England about the Harry Potter series, and how they felt that by students learning about the anti-hero and kids that are disadvantaged, that made children more sympathetic to immigrants, to refugees, and to other who are not as privileged. Much more so than when they did the same kind of study with kids and made a logical argument about it. So again, it's those narrative stories that really move us. Also, really let's acknowledge that this work is long-term. We know, for example, that Rosa Parks didn't just suddenly decide not to move to the back of the bus. In fact, she studied at the Highlander Center in East Tennessee 10 years before to learn about civil disobedience. People are building on one another's work, and it is a long road. Also, we need to have fun. Like one of the founders of Mayday said, Emma Goldberg, thank you, if I can't dance, I don't want to be in the revolution. I think we also saw that through our Community Soils partners here. Got to have some fun, do that fundraising. Let's really enjoy and really embrace the fun that we can have together in doing this work. It really is a joyful mission that we share. And lastly, as this has been touched on by many, we really need all of us to do this work together. We need to move beyond our silos, our sectors, etc., join forces, and go forward. And so with that, we have an opportunity today to take an action with regards to the future of the Leadership Institute. The Leadership Institute had a courageous conversation and decided to move more into the area of social equity. Something that was a little bit scary. There were a lot of conversations, but felt that there was a need to do so. So today, being creative without the use of our technology, we are still going to ask you 3 questions. We're going to ask you 3 questions about the future of the direction of the Leadership Institute, about what role you think the Leadership Institute should take in the social equity movement moving forward. Okay? Our first question is, so get ready, and we're going to ask you to raise your hand. We have those super cool clickers, and we're going to, have it automatically read, but that's okay. We can improvise. Should the Leadership Institute, so our first question, excuse me, is should the Leadership Institute expand its role in the social equity movement? If you say yes, raise your hand. If no, okay. Okay. No? It's okay if you know. Okay. Our second question is, should the Leadership Institute follow up with a second social equity conference to build momentum? That also means we have to do one. Right? No? I'll work. Right? And then lastly, would you be willing to be a leader in helping the Leadership Institute define and advance its role in social equity moving forward? Yes, raise your hand. Oh. No? Right?
Yeah. Well, for the first two questions, that was an overwhelming and resounding yes, of course. It does sound like everyone is interested in having more conversations and for the Leadership Institute to continue on with their work in the social equity movement. So that's very exciting, and we'll potentially see more to come there. And thank you to all of you who raised your hand to help move that forward. I think in this case, maybe the Leadership Institute might reach out moving forward. But all of this information, actually, they're going to take back and have conversations amongst the board there and see how it might work out to move forward to have a second conference, as we just asked, or what might be in the future. So stay tuned. We will have more to come from the Leadership Institute on the topic of social equity. And yeah, I think I'm going to turn it to Stephanie. Yes? Okay.
We opened up our presentation with what do you expect? As a member of the community and the world, I expect an end to social inequity.